Hello everyone, and this is Marcio Cardoso here with another political hot take video in education reform. And this is my 7th video on education, and it's a pretty important one, I think. It has to do with teacher salaries, where I come in. I am a proud social studies teacher here in the state of California. I teach 7th graders. I enjoy it. I'm in my 7th year teaching 7th graders. Um, and it's a passion that I enjoy. But like any job, like any career, there's challenges. And no matter what school you're going to work at, you're going to have challenges, whether the kids can be challenging, or the parents can be challenging, or sometimes coworkers can be challenging. And I'm lucky because where I'm at right now, I have overall pretty good students, a set of parents I can't complain about, and I have a great staff that I work with. So no real complaints. I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. Um, but that's not always been the case, and that's certainly not the case with all the teachers here in California or Oklahoma or anywhere in the country. We have a hard job, and we don't get appreciated enough like I think people need to. Teaching school, particularly public school, is a challenge because in public school you get everybody. You just get everybody. We're not just teaching who we want to teach. It's a service, so you provide it to everybody who wants it. And because public education is compulsory, you're basically getting everybody. And as a result, it's not that easy. Now, people are going to say, teaching is not that hard. You only work until 3 o'clock. Typically, most schools will start around 8 o'clock and go to about 3 o'clock in that ballpark, whereas other jobs will go until about 5 o'clock. And this is the big one. Teachers, you only teach half the year. And admittedly, I have, there's 180 school days in California, and we have a couple of extra non-student work days. So I personally have a total of 186 work days in a year, with all but a few with students, with kids. And of course, people say, well, that's great. That means you have about 3 months off. And yes, we do. We have a couple months off in the summer. We get some time off during winter break, Thanksgiving, spring break. So you add, 2 weeks usually for winter break, plus a week for spring break and Thanksgiving. Add it all together, you have about 3 months off. Whereas the average American worker would be lucky if they can get a couple of weeks off a year. But it's still not that simple. Because when we are working our you-know-what's off. You see, when you have a job, usually all the variables are pretty easy to manage. What you have to do, who you have to work with, what you have to deal. But as a teacher, we get the most unpredictable variable in the world, and that is children. Children are very unpredictable. They just are. Especially, I work with 7th graders, so they're mainly 12 and 13 years old. They're entering adolescence. They're very unpredictable at that age, but they're still quite unpredictable, and they can be quite unpredictable when they're younger or when they're older in high school. And it's not easy to work with them, and it's not easy to manage them. And then you have the adage of having to also deal with parents. Because they're minors and they're under 18, it's not just dealing with the kids and that's it. You also have to factor in their parents. And that can be an issue. And then you have the issue of how do you get along with and work with your coworkers, which is somewhat mitigated by the fact that you're almost you're in a room all day almost just with kids, not with other coworkers, but still that's a factor. Whereas most of the jobs, you're just dealing with coworkers and that's it. You're not dealing with parents or kids or other adults. And if you have a service job, yeah, you got to serve a customer, so we get that. But for the most part, you're just dealing with a certain adult, and that's it. We have to deal with adults, but mainly they're kids. And when we have to deal with adults, it's because they're parents. They're not just adults, now they're parents. So if there's an issue going on, a parent is usually going to get very protective of their kid, and understandably so. But it adds more complication to it. Bottom line is we have a really tough job, as tough as there is out there. There's, in my opinion, only a handful that might be tougher. Firefighter, police officer, Those I think are tougher. And there's others out there, I'm sure. But there's not many more, in my opinion, that add the mental strain, particularly, and to a certain extent the physical strain, as being a teacher. It's not easy. But if you're compensated accordingly, it makes it worth it. Here's the problem. I don't think teachers are compensated accordingly. Firefighters and police officers have tough jobs, but they are compensated at much greater amounts than teachers are. Much greater amounts. And again, I think they have more difficult jobs, so I understand that they're compensated at higher amounts. I'm not saying teachers should be paid at the same rate as a firefighter or a police officer. I don't think that's quite the case. But we do deserve to be paid a little bit more than what we are now. Pay represents respect. Usually, people look at a dentist or doctor or a police officer with some form of respect, usually. And in part because they look at that as a prestigious job because they get paid accordingly. Teachers don't get paid accordingly that way. And as a result, I don't think teachers are given the respect that they once were. And that's a big deal. Especially if you're teaching at a school where maybe it's lower socioeconomic status, population, and kids, they come from homes where it's difficult households, and they need that parental figure, they need that respectable figure. But if they don't respect their teacher, if they're not able to look up to their teacher, it creates an issue. It's also an issue of, do I want to take the profession if I'm not going to get paid accordingly? Like, let's say I'm just getting out of college and I want to get a job or I want to pursue a certain career. Do I want to pursue teaching? If I know it doesn't pay that much, the answer is probably going to be no. That's the issue. A lot of teachers who do enter the profession, they get out really quickly. They're burnt out. They're usually placed into classroom environments where they're dealing with more difficult kids. As I mentioned in a previous video, usually the newest teachers get the toughest kids a lot of the times, which doesn't make much sense. Then you have the fact that newest teachers get paid the least amount, and we get it. The more experience you have, the more money you make, okay. But new teachers, they start off at a very low level, and that's a problem. They don't make much at the beginning, and then they deal with all this stress of difficult students, difficult parents right off the bat. And it's difficult to get through that first year because, again, as a teacher, you're in the classroom all by yourself, so you almost have to get through a year or two to really develop experience because it's hard to lean on other teachers when you're teaching, you're the only one in there. And so it's a difficult job to get started. And once you get going, okay, you develop that experience, and after a few years, the pay would hopefully go a little bit better, a little bit higher, and then you're okay. But that's not always the case. Here in California, particularly where I work, I make a decent amount. I can make it happen. It's not great. I'm not living the high life. I would say I'm slightly lower middle class, maybe middle class. I have enough to get by, but I don't have a whole lot of savings. But I have some savings. And of course, so many Americans don't have that. That's a whole other problem. But considering that, I got a degree. I went to school. I have a master's degree. All these things. And to be a teacher, you have to have a degree. So it's a job that requires a high level of education. You have to have a bachelor's degree, and many, many teachers now have master's degrees as well, in addition to a certificate to teach, a credential is what it's called. And yet all that, which is not cheap, you got to pay for all those degrees and years of college, and the potential student debt that you incur, and then you're going to only make so much. And again, I'm lucky because I'm in a decent district that pays well, fairly well considering speaking. Look what's going on in Oklahoma. Look what was going on in West Virginia. Look what's going on in Kentucky. Those teachers, they just don't make much at all. They don't make anything. And you look at the results, you get what you pay for. As I've said before, you get what you pay for. States that pay their teachers better tend to get better test results or better results from education. I was looking at a stat the other day, Connecticut and Illinois were two states that pay their teachers pretty well, comparatively speaking. I think Maryland was another. Connecticut, Maryland, and Illinois. They're some of the best at paying their teachers. They're also some of the best in terms of test scores. They do a real job at getting their students to perform well. Why is that? I think it's because they pay their teachers well. Why is that important? Because if you pay your teachers well, people are going to want to enter the profession and stay there, which means you don't have a continuous flow of teachers coming in and out, which means the teachers that are in your state are going to build experience, they're going to get better at their jobs, and they're going to deliver better quality of education to the students, and as a result, the students can perform better. It's a continuous cycle. And then you have states like Oklahoma, West Virginia, Kentucky. Those states, they are some of the worst at paying their teachers, and their test results are not as good. There's a correlation. I guarantee you the teachers in Oklahoma and West Virginia and Kentucky who've been teaching there for a while, they're good teachers and they know what they're doing. The problem is there's probably not a whole lot of them who've been there for a while because so many that enter then leave right away because they realize they can't get paid enough. And then the cycle continues. And here in California, well, it's a mixed bag. We're a huge state. Where I'm at, we pay decent. We do okay. There's other areas in the state that are much, much worse. Again, we're a huge, diverse state, so we're different than a state like Oklahoma, West Virginia, which is smaller, more condensed. But there's areas of California, they don't pay their teachers that well at all. And if you look in those areas, that's where some of the lower performing schools in the state are at. I'm at a school that pays, I think, a decent amount. And I think our test scores are a reflection of that. Are we one of the top schools? Maybe not, but we're decent. We're solid. We're on stable footing. A school that I had worked at previously, not as stable a footing. How about this? They don't pay their teachers as much. Certainly not at the beginning. A first year in my previous spot, they don't make as much as a first year in my current spot. And so what happens at the school that I used to work with? People go in and out because they don't make much at the beginning, and it's not the easiest school to work with, and there you go. We got to pay our teachers more, particularly right off the bat. I think that first year salary needs to be much more respectable than it is in so many places. So that way you can hook them in, bring them in, and make a teacher go, oh, well, we get paid accordingly. I can do this. Money isn't just about being able to buy whatever you want. It provides a sense of security. It also provides a sense of self-worth. You feel more worthwhile if you get paid more. And you feel more worthless if you don't. It's true. It really is, regardless of your profession. But especially with the additive of teaching, because you're dealing with not just your coworkers, not just adults who in this case are parents, but you're dealing with the ultimate unknown variable. You're dealing with kids. The correlation is there. The states that pay their teachers the best tend to get the best results. The states that don't pay their best don't get the greatest results. Bottom line. You pay them more, you pay us more, we're more likely to stay. Therefore, we gain experience. Therefore, we're better at it. People are saying, oh, but the quality of education is bad. The quality of education in this country is starting to fade. Overall, it is starting to fade. Yes, because there's a teacher shortage, because so many people are leaving the profession because they don't feel appreciated, which is creating a vacuum which people take up. But again, they have not a lot of experience. And if you're in a school where everybody's inexperienced, you can't lean off of anybody. You can't lean off of experienced coworkers. And so you burn out, you feel frustrated, and you flush out. You pay us more, we're more likely to stay, we gain that experience. We then can help the few people who keep coming in, the handful of people that will keep coming in to replace retirees, and you have a more stable occupation. You get what you pay for. You want to improve the quality of teaching in this country because it's an issue, you pay the teachers more. It's universal with any job. You pay somebody more because you're valuing them more and you're expecting more out of them. And you will get more out of them if you pay them more. And it's not just with teaching, but it's with any job. The reason why teaching is such a hot button issue is because it's a public service job, i.e. teachers are funded with taxpayer dollars. We're not a private company. We're funded with your taxes. That's why it's more of a hot button issue. But clearly people are getting it now. They're figuring it out. They figured it out in West Virginia. They finally got some kind of a raise. They're starting to figure it out in Oklahoma and Kentucky as well. And good for those people. Good for those teachers. I think as teachers, we need to rise up and come even more united than just at the state level, though. Honestly, there should be a national-wide protest. If the state of Oklahoma is not paying its teachers enough money, forget just Oklahomans, all teachers throughout the country should have a walkout. All teachers should maybe threaten a strike. I know that would seem like a big deal, maybe it's too much of a stretch, but think about it. If every public school teacher in the country was considering a strike, at the very least, that's going to put big time pressure on Oklahoma to answer the call. If Kentucky has an issue, not just Kentucky teachers, maybe all teachers, or maybe teachers throughout the region of the Southeast can rise up and protest and maybe threaten with a strike. That's something as teachers that we could consider doing to try to demand fair wages. So many people in this country are not being paid what they deserve. It's not just teachers. I'm coming at this from an educational perspective because I am a teacher. But I've seen it all. I've seen it. I know what the solutions are needed when it comes to education. And there's nothing bigger, there's nothing more important, in my opinion, than providing increases for teacher salaries. Heck, I'm not even arguing for me, because like I said, sure, I could take more, but I'm okay now. But that's also because I'm in my 7th year. And so now I make much more money than someone who would be entering my school in their first year. That first year person that's entering, it's going to be a different story. That first year person, they need to be making more money than they would currently be making now. It would incentivize them to stay. That's the key. It would incentivize them to stay, and if they stay, trust me, they get better. You always get better after a couple of years. And as a result, the quality of education at that school gets better, because instead of having a revolving door, you now have someone who's building up experience. And it makes a huge, huge difference. Got to pay the teachers. You do that, you'll improve the quality of education. That's got to be the message for everyone out there. And for the message for teachers specifically, we got to be forceful with it. Kudos to West Virginia's teachers and Oklahoma's and Kentucky's. But I think we got to be bigger than that. I think, why not have the whole nation of public school teachers come out and support when a state like Kentucky needs it, or a state like Oklahoma? Or what about a state like Mississippi, which has the lowest paying teachers, and what a shock, also has the lowest quality of schools, according to many statistics. Maybe let's stand behind Mississippi teachers. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they can't get together. Maybe there's something going on. As a country, let's demand it. Let's say Mississippi needs a raise. Let's come together as a country. That'll definitely put pressure on Mississippi. We need to do this. If we put pressure, as we saw in West Virginia and as we're seeing in Oklahoma and Kentucky, we can get the raises that we need. And if teachers get the raises they need, it improves the quality of teaching because you're having more experienced teachers, which will then turn into better educated students, which will then turn to a much more educated and enlightened population, which is what we need. And we need a lot of that right now. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.